Hi, Kate here with another video. Hope everyone is doing well. If you enjoy my content, please like and subscribe. Helps me build the channel. On YouTube, I'm up to 202 subscribers, I believe. And on Rumble, I'm up to 14 subscribers, so helps me build the channel. I'm working on building it. Yeah, I really hate YouTube. Their censorship is out of control, so I have to be really careful about what I say. So I'm working to build. I'm going to eventually move everything to Rumble, but I want to build up YouTube first. Okay, so this video I'm going to focus on Jimmy Dore. Had a contentious interview with Cornel West a couple of weeks ago. I've been meaning to make this video for a while, for the last couple of weeks. I just got distracted. I started a new job, which actually pays a lot more than my previous job, but it's far away and it's some transportation problems. Everything's okay. Everything is working out. I have my little dog here, part Chihuahua, Micah. You might see him scurrying around. Great dog, but very energetic and extremely needy. So he may interrupt our proceedings here. Okay, so to begin. Oh, I had to begin. So, I want to talk a little bit about Russell Brand. He's a political commentator. He was, I watch him. I want to talk a little bit about Russell Brand. He's a British YouTuber. He's on other mediums as well. Just political commentary. I watch him. I like him. Recently, or about a week or so ago, he was accused of being an abuser. As I understand, one accusation, he had sex with a 16-year-old. I think he was in his 30s at the time. It's from 10 years ago. It's not a good thing to do, but it was legal in Britain. Not a good thing to do. And there's another accusation, which I'm a bit shaky on what it is, but a whole torrent of this accusations came out from the British media. Now, on Facebook, I argued for a somewhat nuanced approach of it. Approach towards Russell Brand, whatever's going on. Now, if he's guilty, if he's an abuser, did some sleazy stuff, he should be held accountable, absolutely. But what got me is these insane media pile-ons. The British media is notoriously, they love a sex scandal for one thing, but they're notoriously hypocritical. There was a Jimmy Savile case, who's a famous entertainer in Britain from the 50s to the 70s or later. He was a notorious pedophile. I mean, weird stuff came out shortly after he died. This was well known to the British ruling class. He was close friends with the royal family, very close to Charles Windsor, and he was a horrible guy, and this was well known. The media protected him for his entire life, really. Ted Heath, Prime Minister, the Conservative Prime Minister in the 60s and 70s, he was a known pedophile. He'd go to even when he was Prime Minister, he'd visit like hospitals. He'd go to the children's wing, and everyone kind of knew what he was doing. The media kept quiet about it. In the U.S., there's a Harvey Weinstein case. Harvey Weinstein was a horrible scumbag abuser. This was well known in Hollywood for at least 20 years or longer. This was very well known. The media protected him. There's so many cases where the media protects people like this, abusers, shitty people who are politically or culturally very powerful. So what we see, Brand, all of a sudden the British media found religion. All of a sudden they're going on this crusade. Russell Brand very well may be guilty. I don't know. He had a problem he was a movie actor, an actor. He had a problem with drugs, a problem with addiction. He was a sex addict, and he very well might have done some sleazy stuff from 10 years ago, and he should be held accountable. He got over addiction, got into spirituality. He has two channels, one like a political social commentary channel, and this other channel is Awakening with Russell Brand, where he interviews yoga teachers and talks about meditation techniques, and he interviewed Gabor Mate and other people overcoming trauma and addiction, good stuff. But his political channel, he talks about politics, political commentary, and I largely agree with him. He calls out U.S. imperialism in Ukraine, the proxy war, the corruption of the Biden family, the control of media, C-19 narratives, and things like that, and I agree with him. Now, it seems to be the media pile-on seems to be politically orchestrated. He was on the Bill Maher show about a month ago, American liberal comedian, and he called out the proxy war in Ukraine and a few other things, and he got wild cheers from the audience. The audience, who were presumably liberals or Bill Maher fans, presumably security state worshipping liberals, and they loved and they love Russell Brand. They agreed with him. This, I think, threatens some people. Now, I consume a lot of independent media. The Gray Zone. Yeah, Jimmy Dore, but he's the least of it. The Gray Zone, Black Agenda Report, Revolutionary Blackout Network, Do Dissidents, Danny Haiphong, Richard Medhurst. They're the famous ones. They're more obscure ones. I watch a lot more the more obscure. Viva Fry, Barnes, Redacted with Clayton Morse, from across the, mostly on the left, but across the political spectrum. And the main enemy I see is the security state, which is what most of the left is totally missing. The security state. They're increasing control. I mean, the Gray Zone talks about this all the time. Palantir and all these companies are really censoring media, censoring dialogue. And they're taking down C.J. Hopkins, American political satirist in Germany. They're really destroying him. Roger Waters, who's calling out the proxy war in Ukraine. They're after him. What they did to Assange. I see what they're doing to Russell Brand along the same lines. They find out they use false rape accusations against Assange to destroy him. They're doing the same thing with Russell Brand. That doesn't mean we should give him a pass. If he did some shitty stuff, he should be held accountable. I'm not a rape apologist. He should be held accountable, absolutely. But these pylons just annoy the hell out of me, these orchestrated pylons. A few media outlets who slam Brand, and everyone feels they have to, like culture wars shit, which is very destructive to the left. So, in a future video, my next video, I might talk about Russell Brand. I debated this on Facebook, and I got this insane level of rage and hysteria that I would dare defend Russell Brand. I mean, I just don't think like most of the Facebook left. That's just me. The people just seem to see things differently. People still think it's like 1990 and they're wrapped up in this cultural war stuff. I just see things totally different. But okay, anyway, got that out of the way. Okay, I'm going to talk about the contentious interview of Jimmy Dore and Cornel West. Before I do, talk about the background, the elections. Okay, Joe Biden is the incumbent. He's running for re-election. He's a deeply vulnerable candidate. He's deeply unpopular figure. Right now, I believe he's against Trump. He's polling like Trump is 47 to 46. Like Trump is 1 point, who's been indicted 4 times and supposedly the worst president in U.S. history. He's beating Biden by 1 point. Other people like Nikki Haley or normal Republicans clean the floor with Biden. He's a deeply unpopular figure. He's never been a popular figure to begin with. His presidential campaign in the 80s fell apart because of plagiarism and lies. Made up tall tales about the civil rights movement. I've discussed this in earlier videos created. He ran in 2019. He was originally considered an absurd figure. His tour bus was the No Malarkey Express. And he just seemed like some old guy from 1940s. No one used the term no malarkey. It's not kind of 1950s term. And he seemed like he overreacted. Biden got extremely defensive to slightly challenging questions. He just lost this guy's running for president. He seemed like an absurd figure. Then, of course, there was the COVID lockdown. And in 2016 and 2019, 2020, it was incendiary, angry, populist mood. Largely, Bernie Sanders should have gotten the nomination, but the Democrats, of course, made sure that he didn't. And Bernie fully cooperated with this. Bernie fully cooperated with this. So anyway, 2020, there were the COVID lockdowns. Obama made a few phone calls, got the other candidates to drop out and endorse Biden. And he became the official frontrunner. They set that up, so he was the official frontrunner. And the slogan was "Settle for Biden." No one liked him really, but the alternative was Trump. Well, Democratic Party media whipped up this insane hysteria over Trump, and I don't like Trump. He's a cheap demagogue. But he's not the next Hitler. That's ridiculous. But the plot to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer, which was entirely an FBI entrapment, he played a huge role, as well as media censorship, stuff coming out now, the Twitter files, Matt Taibbi and others showed, social media, Twitter, and it was censored on behalf of the secret police, on behalf of the Democratic Party. And I don't like Trump. I don't dig Trump. He's a cheap demagogue who doesn't offer anything. I'm not promoting Trump. I'm not promoting the right wing. Of course, the Democratic Party is a far right-wing party as well. There's nothing leftist or progressive about Biden. So anyway, Biden got in, and working people are still really hurting. The economy is still really bad for most people. Inflation is a major issue, and yes, a lot of it is Biden's fault. The way they dealt with COVID, they've injected a lot of liquidity into the economy. Something like maybe 2020 and 2023, 40% of all dollars printed were printed in that time since the dollar existed in the 1830s. So this gets very complicated. Maybe I'll talk about this in a future video. So inflation is an issue. Biden has done nothing to help working people, despite Bernie Sanders saying he's the most pro-labor president since FDR, which is kind of complete nonsense. He couldn't raise the federal minimum wage because of the Senate parliamentarian, a position no one heard of. And Bush, where the president fired the Senate parliamentarian, actually. Biden let the student loan moratorium lapse and the eviction moratorium lapse. And my dog is going crazy on me here, but I'll have to ignore him. I let these lapse. They're Trump-era measures, and he let them lapse. Biden tried the student loan forgiveness thing. The student loan bubble was largely created by Biden in the first place, but he had the student loan forgiveness program, which was overturned by Trump-appointed judges who were confirmed by Democrats. Widely believed it was designed to fail. To show Biden's trying to do something, but he can't. His infrastructure program, key parts of it were vetoed blocked by Manchin and Christian Sinema. That time, the Democrats have a designated villain. They always do this. So, ultimately, you have to deliver something. You need more than, I'm not Trump. I'm protecting you from white supremacy. Ultimately, you need to deliver, and Biden's not doing this. He's an intensely unpopular figure. There's a rail disaster, seemingly a rail disaster every other week, and he's not doing anything. Every time Biden, does something, it's a public relations disaster. When he went to Maui, it was a complete public relations disaster. Okay, that's all that. On top of that, Biden has always had weird gaffes. His entire political career, he's known for this. On top of that, though, he has visible dementia. According to one account, his cognitive decline is in free fall. He literally shakes hands with people who aren't there. He doesn't know where he is half the time. He gets confused. When he was at West Point, he fell off the stage. He leaves events before they're over. Almost every speech comes out garbled and bizarre. He was at the G20 meeting, I think it was in Kuala Lumpur, in Malaysia. He said something like, he talked about his old thing about a dog, called somebody a dog-faced pony soldier, a line he used from his campaign, some obscure reference from a John Wayne movie, and he explained this and no one knew what the hell he was talking about. He's in a world of his own. He has visible dementia, and everyone knows this. He's a deeply unpopular figure. So the Democrats have a problem. He's most likely not going to last until November. Like, he's visibly falling apart week by week, day by day. So the Democrats have a problem. So there are challengers. Marianne Williamson and RFK Jr. I'll talk about them in a minute. Kim Iverson, YouTuber, she has interesting commentary. Kim Iverson said that, her theory, I think is probably right, that right now they're planning to replace, at the convention, they're going to push him through the primaries. At the convention, they'll replace him with Gavin Newsom, the governor of California. He's the only person, the Democrats don't have anyone right now with any appeal. They slap down any hint of populism. They don't have any establishment candidates. They don't have anybody with any appeal. So they're probably going to try to impose Gavin Newsom. He's not, Kamala Harris is actually deeply unpopular herself. She's even more unpopular than Biden, and her brains are just as scrambled as Biden. So they're probably going to try to implant Gavin Newsom. He's not a popular figure either, and it could be a shitstorm. I'm hoping it is. So Biden is deeply vulnerable. The Democrats have a problem. So Marianne Williamson and RFK Jr. running in the primaries, they smell blood. I think they're serious. They sniff blood. Biden is vulnerable. It's kind of unusual to run against an incumbent, like nobody ran against Obama. Last happened, Ted Kennedy ran against Jimmy Carter in, I think it was 1976 election, if I remember. Anyway, but it's really unusual. Okay, so Marianne Williamson, she's not very interesting. She's one of the most least interesting political figures around. I'll talk about her briefly. She basically she comes from a wealthy Dallas, Texas family. She apparently was a hippie, went through a hippie stage for about 10 years. She calls her lost decade. Then she read this book, Course in Miracles. It's kind of like New Age Christian mysticism. I haven't read it, but I have friends who are really into it. It's popular in the Congregational Church. I live in New England. The Congregationalist Protestant denomination is one of the main offshoots of the New England Puritans. However, today the Congregationalists are very liberal. They're basically semi-Buddhists. So anyway, this book has been popular. Marianne Williamson read it. She used it to get her life together. She was involved in caring for AIDS patients, AIDS victims in the Bay Area. She was famous for that. She had 2 different organizations. They both fell apart because she's a rather nasty person to work for, despite her New Age spirituality. She's not an easy person to work for. As I understand, her 2 organizations fell apart. She became a writer. But she was heavily promoted by Oprah, one of those people Oprah inflicted on us. I haven't really closely followed her, but she was a best-selling writer. She has, I don't know, a bunch of books. I think she has 15 books out. I haven't read any of her books. I doubt I ever will. But she's, has a following. She ran for president in 2020. Yeah, she ran for president in 2020. I didn't like her. She's not all that interesting, but she was a bit refreshing as opposed to the militarism of all the other candidates. She's running now. She's not all that left-wing. She wants health care for all and tax billionaires, increase the tax rates for the wealthy. Other than that, she supports Biden in Ukraine war. She's not very interesting. She won't get too far, but okay. The real interesting candidate is RFK Jr. And I have to be really careful what I say here. Combination, first YouTube censorship, but also people might misunderstand what I'm trying to say here and have to use like Aesopian language. Lenin and Gramsci talked about Aesopian language, like coded language. So RFK Jr., what I know, he was one of the Kennedys, of course. He's the son of Bobby Kennedy, who ran for president. He was assassinated in 1967. I have never been a big fan of the Kennedys. What I understand about Bobby Kennedy was a ruthless political street fighter. He may have grown into the role and actually evolved before he was assassinated. I don't know. But anyway, and JFK was assassinated. RFK Jr.'s uncle, President Kennedy, was assassinated in 1960, famously. So he was 7 years old when his uncle, the president, was assassinated, and 14-year-old when his father was assassinated. That can be traumatic to go through for anybody, of course. RFK Jr. had a problem with addiction. I believe he was kicked out of prep school for marijuana. Nothing wrong with that. But and then he was a heroin addict for a time. He got over it. He was an environmental lawyer, and he did some really important work on environmental activism, cleaning up waterways, 2 different campaigns. He played a very important role in this, cleaning up the Hudson River and other rivers, and he was an activist. He was arrested in a VA case in Puerto Rico, famous military shelling range, environmentally very destructive. He was arrested for protesting on that. To his credit, I give him a lot of credit for that. He's famously critical, RFK Jr. is famously critical of the vaccination campaign. That's very famous for. He was initially reluctant to get into this. Now, I gotta say, preface there, my dogs are getting really impatient. Some preface there that the vaccines are safe and effective. You should always agree with the FDA and CDC. They're safe and effective, absolutely. Vaccines have no connection with autism. That's just crazy conspiracy theories. Don't believe any of that. They're safe, 100% safe and effective, etc., etc. I do support the medical freedom movement, and I am using Aesopian language here, but okay. So RFK Jr. says that, he was on a campaign against mercury in meat and food and water, which is a serious problem. And he noticed a group of people would follow him around, and they tried to get him interested in vaccinations causing autism. And he initially didn't want to get involved in it, but finally read some of their literature, and he was convinced. Now, vaccines have no connection with autism. They're just a QAnon conspiracy theory. Don't believe any of it. But, so RFK Jr. read some of the literature, and, he was convinced. There's a famous Lancet study, which was discredited, which shows a link between vaccines and autism. That study was retracted, but RFK Jr. says there are dozens of other studies which do show a link. Now, I'm repeating what RFK Jr. says, not what I'm saying. I'm repeating what he's saying. So there's that. So RFK Jr. says in the last 30 years there's been a dramatic rise in previously rare childhood illnesses, and this coincides with a dramatic rise in vaccines. I think kids are now required to get astounding 121 vaccinations, something like that. And RFK Jr. says maybe we should investigate that. There could be environmental factors, could be something else as well. But RFK Jr. does think it's these vaccines. Now, he's not opposed to vaccination science. He's not an anti-vaxxer. In fact, he supports the MMR, mumps, measles, rubella, traditional MMR vaccines. Sometimes he says they should be mandated. So he's not opposed to vaccination science, despite his media hysteria around him. He's not. So anyway, he in 2018 he founded the Children's Health Defense to fight activism. People who are critical of the medical lobby. The pharmaceutical industry is extremely powerful. He founded his CHD, and he's running for president. So okay, he's definitely, and he says some things other than vaccination. He criticizes the Ukraine war. He calls it a proxy war. He talks about the CIA and U.S. imperialism, and the CIA coups around the world, horrible things the CIA's done, U.S. has done in Libya and many other parts of the world, Syria. He openly talks about this. Now, he says stuff which people on the left already know. A high school kid who's read Noam Chomsky or Howard Zinn or Parenti for the first time could tell you this. Surprisingly, so much of the Facebook left still doesn't get it, but anybody on the left should know these things. But an RFK Jr. is not a leftist. He's a liberal. I would say classical liberal. There's a different connotation, but he's a liberal from a period before liberals became fascist, which is what they are now, security state worshipping fascist. Most liberals are. Absolutely. He was an old school Allard Lowenstein liberal, say circa 1975. That's how I classify him. So, he was calling out the CIA, and he was he blames the CIA, a rogue element of the CIA, for killing in Miami, I believe, for killing his father. And okay, he's saying this as a serious candidate for president. He's 20% support right now in the Democratic Party, 20% support. He has an audience of millions of people. He calls out the crimes of the CIA, and people have been doing it for years, but he has an audience of millions. He said this on Tucker Carlson with an audience of over 100 million people. That's significant. Openly saying the CIA killed his father and his uncle, with hundreds of millions of people watching, this is significant. Whatever is other false, and I don't politically support him. I'm not going to vote for him, even if he runs as independent. I can't support him for so many reasons, but it is significant, some of the stuff he's saying. Okay, so a big thing, he was quoted or misquoted. He was at an event, I don't know, 7 months ago, an Italian restaurant in New York, which he said was a private function. He basically wondered if the vaccines, if, say, Chinese people and Ashkenazi Jews are not as affected by the vaccine. He was misquoted as saying, the way it was misquoted, it sounded like he was an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. And I'm not going to go out of my way to defend what he said. It did sound kind of weird. But keep in mind, the Russian Ministry of Defense, they first brought up that the U.S. is biowarfare, between 40 and 50 biowarfare labs in Ukraine. They had very detailed, extremely detailed documentation, including how much employees were being paid, the specific lines of research they were doing, and I'm convinced Victoria Nuland basically admitted it. So one of the things Russian Ministry of Defense brought up is American-sponsored researchers were researching on if it would be possible to biologically engineer pathogen to target Slavic people. Now, that's kind of complicated. Genetically, we're all very similar. But there are genetic haplogroups. Which some people have, like I think it's HNA, I believe it's called, which Finno-Ugric speaking people have, like languages related to Finnish. 40% of all Finnish males have this in their haplogroups, which are genetic markers. 40% of all Finnish males have this on their Y chromosomes. And it's common in people speaking languages in that family, Hungarian, Estonian, and there's 15 or so Finno-Ugric speaking peoples in Siberia, the Samoyeds, the Yukugirs, the Mari people, the Komi people, the Karelians, and they all have this genetic haplogroup. So some in larger amounts, Hungary more in trace amounts, from the Magyars, which trace amounts. But the idea might be, would it be possible to engineer a pathogen which could target people with a specific haplogroup? I don't know. What what made Russian Ministry of Defense claims, and I think it's true, they were researching whether it would be possible to find something targeting Slavic-speaking people. I don't know. I think that's what RFK Jr. was alluding to. The way he expressed it was didn't come off that great, and so many people really slammed him for this. Okay, so and I don't think he's anti-Semitic. Anti-Semitism is horrible and it should be strongly condemned. I've condemned it many times in real life and Facebook. I've condemned it many times. I don't think RFK Jr. is anti-Semitic. But anyway, what he did is to deflect, he doubled down on his pro-Zionism. I mean, he already was pro-Israeli, pro-Zionism. And he alienated his leftist support. He did have some support from the left. He pushed them away with this. Zionism is horrible. Utterly horrible. He ignores how Palestinians are treated. He's friends with his Rabbi Shmuley, who's kind of a fraud. Max Blumenthal knows him, and this guy's kind of a scammer. Anyway, he's doubling down the Zionism, which is dangerous because it equates anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. You can criticize Israel and not be anti-Semitic, and that's an extremely important point. They were slamming, destroying Jeremy Corbyn on that, and RFK Jr. was afraid of being a new Jeremy Corbyn, and some of his other positions. And at some level, and Max Blumenthal, who's Jewish, by the way, of the Gray Zone, originally supported RFK Jr. and wanted to have a friendly debate with him. In fact, wanted to even work on his campaign. He wouldn't have a friendly debate, but nope, he was rebuffed. Nope. RFK Jr., unlike other candidates, is actually attuned to independent media. He says he watches the Duran, watches the Gray Zone, so many other outlets. Mainstream candidates just ignore it. It's not supposed to be. They ignore indie media. More people watch indie media than watch CNN now. My little chihuahua's going nuts here. So anyway, I can't support RFK Jr., and yeah, to some extent, he's a sheepdog. He's a sheepdog, like Bernie Sanders, bringing people back into the Democratic Party when they should be leaving. Yeah, that is that dynamic. But it's a little more complicated like that. I see him as a sheepdog, but also a hand grenade in the Democratic Party. He's clearly an outlier, more so than Bernie Sanders was. He's flirting with running as independent. What's going on with that? The DNC said, as I understand, they threatened to, anyone who was campaigning in New Hampshire and Iowa, anyone who sets foot in those states, they'll discount the electoral votes, which is a very sleazy, undemocratic move. It's well known how sleazy and corrupt and undemocratic the DNC is. So I think RFK Jr. is kind of sort of bargaining or trying to pressure the DNC to give him a shot. Give him a chance. He may actually run third party. I don't know. I don't think it's likely right now, but he may. He may. In fact, if the Democrats totally block him, he very well may. Some talk of him running on the Libertarian ticket. I really don't know. There's one theory that he may actually run third party or as an independent to get Biden reelected. Presumably, he'd draw votes away from Trump. And there's that theory. I'm not sure about that. There's another theory that he's really running to help, other way around, to help Trump. And Jim Kavanaugh, whom I've interviewed, I think has a really perceptive analysis. Jim Kavanaugh kind of hints that it's going to be a tumultuous election. The Democrats may actually coalesce around RFK Jr. And I could see that happening. I don't support RFK Jr. I don't have any hopes of him as a politician or as a person. No, I don't buy into that shit. But what I'm thinking might happen, he may crystallize some major crack. I'm looking at him as a hand grenade, and he has some pretty big flaws. He's not a Bernie Sanders exactly. Maybe he is, maybe I don't know what's going to happen. So it's interesting to follow that, what's going on. People thought Bernie Sanders was playing 5D chess, which was nonsense. He's not. But I think to some extent RFK Jr. actually is. And I'm not going to vote for him. I'm not going to support him. But it's interesting to follow what's kind of happening there. Okay. Now, Jimmy Dore and Cornel West. Okay, so Jimmy Dore, I've talked about him in previous videos. I generally like him. He's not popular on the Facebook left, and it's not cool to like Jimmy Dore, even though a lot of people watch him but won't admit that they watch him. It's really interesting. I know people really slam him, call him a grifter, but are familiar with each of his shows. No, I think Jimmy Dore is a populist. He's a left populist. And this makes people on the left nervous. Like he's bringing people out of the Democratic Party. He's reaching more people than any socialist organization is. Many more people. He has, I think, 1.5 million subscribers right now. And he's reaching many more people than all the socialist groups are put together. He's bringing people out of the Democratic Party, moving them left. A lot of people are nervous about exactly where he's moving them to. But I think that's unfounded. I think we need to understand populism is not necessarily a threat. So yeah, Jimmy Dore has flaws. He can't explain the labor theory of value or Lenin's theory of imperialism. And yeah, his transphobia drives me up a wall. It drives me up a freaking wall, and a couple of times I lost my patience with him. I can't take this guy anymore. I almost unsubscribed, and yeah, he's doing it in an opportunistic sense, not in a, like, appealing to the masses, not in a principled sense. He's just, and, that, in some other areas, he does have flaws. He says he's in the tradition of Fred Hampton. Okay, and he talks about Chris Smalls, Amazon organizer in Staten Island. He says very often that Chris Smalls, Staten Island's a borough of New York. It's Trump country. They went for Trump. He says, Chris Smalls, when he organized the Amazon warehouse there, he didn't ask people, are they Trump supporters, are they Biden supporters? He organized them. And that's possibly a lot of the Amazon employees are commuters. I don't really know, but I get what Dore's trying to do. He's trying to get beyond the shit lib, the culture war narratives. I get what he's trying to do, and I agree with it. However, he does get some things wrong. He talked about Fred Hampton's relationship to the Young Patriots, who are white people from Appalachia who were radicalized. He said, they were racist, but Fred Hampton still talked to them. Actually, the Young Patriots got over their racism by that time. And Dore gets some things wrong, absolutely. He comes off kind of basic. He doesn't know anything about other countries. This is common to most Americans. Most Americans don't know very little about anything outside the U.S. It's not taught in schools. It's kind of kept that way. And he knows very astute about U.S. politics. I agree with him about the Democratic Party, about U.S. imperialism, and broadly speaking, I agree with him. He's what we need. He has some sharp flaws, absolutely. He has some flaws. Anyway, he's a comedian. He's in the tradition of George Carlin and so many other people. He's a political comedian. He's not Lenin. He's not Marx. He's not, okay, anyway, it is what it is. Okay, Cornel West. Cornel West is a celebrity academic. He's bounced between Harvard and Princeton mostly. Larry Summers pushed him out, the president of Harvard. Lawrence Summers pushed him out in 2003. They treated him really badly. He went to Princeton, then he went back and forth for a while. Larry Summers is kind of a scumbag. He himself was pushed out of Harvard. He's president of Harvard. He was pushed out, I think, in 2007, if I remember, saying women couldn't do math. Later on, he was Obama's Secretary of the Treasury. He was a horrible neoliberal, horrible guy. But anyway, so Cornel West, he's a celebrity. He did a podcast with Travis Smiley. He was in the two Matrix movies, first two Matrix movies. He played a role. He was famous for being an activist. He's in some other movies. He's a well-known, public intellectual. And he was on CNN, mainstream media kind of picked him up. He's not a Marxist. He's a clergy. He dresses like 19th century clergy, preacher. There's cravat. He kind of dresses. He's not a Marxist. He's religious, kind of more like you throw back to utopian socialism. He's very poetic. It gets annoying. He comes off like a showman more than a serious policy wonk. RFK Jr., whatever you want to say, is a policy wonk. And I'll mention, RFK Jr. is a policy wonk. I don't agree with him about immigrants, by the way. He talked about this on Tucker Carlson. A lot of things about RFK Jr. I don't agree with. I really don't agree with. But Cornel West, he comes off as a showman. He's a jazz politician. I'm a jazz politician. The tradition of Coltrane and Miles Davis. I roll my eyes like, oh God. I mean, yeah, I get he means well. And my dear, precious, transgender brothers and sisters, that preacher talk, grates on me a bit. But, I get where he's coming from. I don't hate Cornel West. I don't hate the guy. Okay. So anyway, he was on Jimmy Dore. Jimmy Dore interviewed him. Jimmy Dore, said he wanted to talk with Cornel West, wanted to approach him, but his campaign kind of rebuffed him. Big thing is COVID. Jimmy Dore famously opposes the COVID narratives. And Cornel West didn't want to go there much. The left might sort of agree with him, but didn't want to go there. It's like a third rail of politics. I'm not going to go there at all. And Pasta Jardula from the Convo Couch had a really interesting, sort of challenging but comradely interview with Cornel West about the C19 narratives. Cornel West didn't want to go there, you could tell. And something the left is going to have to talk about and deal with. Earlier, Cornel West said Fauci was a hero. Long before COVID, Fauci's a criminal. There's a lot of blood on his hands. Long, COVID aside, long before that, played a horrible role in the AIDS crisis, AZT. Anyway, Cornel West finally agreed to be on Jimmy Dore's show. By the way, Cornel West is on a lot of leftist media, RBN, Revolutionary Blackout Network. That's great, but he's preaching to the converted. He should reach out to other media. He's on CNN a lot, which I guess is good, but it's all appealing to a liberal audience who aren't going to vote for him. Anyways, okay. So anyway, Cornel West was on Jimmy Dore, and he said, big thing is I'm going to confront Trump and white supremacy and the fascism behind Trump. Dore took an issue with that, and so did I. Jimmy Dore said, well, wait a second. Yeah, how about Biden, the security state around Biden? And you're going to have to appeal. Jimmy Dore tried to get him to appeal to more of a broader left populace, not confronting Trump's fascism. You're just appealing to liberals. You're just appealing to people, the Democracy Now, the Rad-Lib Democracy Now crowd. You're going to have, if you want to go anywhere, you're going to have to broaden it out, a broader populist appeal. And Jimmy Dore said like 3 times, I don't know who your advisors, you're getting bad advice. Cornel West was kind of taken aback, a little offended, or really offended. He said, I'm my own man. I'm not getting advice. And Jimmy Dore said, you have an infiltrator. I know you have an infiltrator. This is where you're going. You have an Jimmy Dore started off saying, I respect you. I just come from out of love and respect, and I support you. I want you. You're a better man than me. Jimmy Dore was going to run for president. He decided not to. You're a better man than me. I have a lot of love and respect, but, here's what you need to do. Jimmy Dore could have expressed this a lot better. He came off kind of like a jerk. I'll admit that. He came off. I agree with him broadly, but he could have expressed it better. And he said, "I'm going to be your campaign coach." And Cornel wasn't. So anyway, what basically he was trying to say, you got to broaden your approach. If you're confronting Trump's fascism, you got to go to Trump country. You got to go to the broad working class who voted for Trump or did not vote for anybody. Fighting Trump's fascism, it's an advertisement for Biden. So many socialist organizations, I read their literature, they say, Trump's a fascist, Trump's authoritarian Nazism, this rise of white supremacy under Trump. And only trouble is the Democrats can't protect you. Only we can protect you. Our tiny socialist group of a couple hundred people, we can, that's absurd. Now, it's not going to get anywhere. That's seeing things through the lens of the Democratic Party. Now, saying this, I got to be nuanced. Jimmy Dore's white. So am I. African Americans, Cornel West, one of his things is confronting white supremacy. And he has a point there. Important to understand, black people face oppression that I'll never face. Even, I've heard from workplaces, from black coworkers. They're pulled over, they're jerked around by the cops all the time. Even in Maine, anywhere, they're constantly pulled over. There is deep-seated racism in the U.S., absolutely. And that's where Cornel West is coming from. Absolutely, he's confronting this, absolutely. Whether is the Trump movement, the fulcrum of fascism and racism? No. But there are absolutely deeply reactionary elements in Trump's appeal. Absolutely. I'm not a Trump supporter. There are deeply reactionary elements. How should the left approach this? By a different appeal. Like the 2 people who were killed in January 6th, Lorena Bobbitt, I forget their names offhand, but both of them were big, 2 of the people who were killed in the Capitol riot, were Obama supporters. The one guy who died of a heart attack, he's from Alabama, he went to D.C. when Obama was elected. But then, at home in Alabama, the plants started closing down, the economy was bad, and he got into right-wing podcasters. One woman had been a big Trump supporter, big Obama supporter, but then, she was repulsed by Hillary Clinton, which would repulse anyway. The best way to fight the reactionary elements in the MAGA movement, and there are, absolutely, is to oppose a radical leftist alternative. So look, not to bash Trump, you're a fascist, you're a fascist. No, national health care for all. End the horrible, do some help for the horrible situation the working class is in. That's how you deal with it. And I think that's what Jimmy Dore was trying to allude to. I admit he kind of came off as a jerk the way he said it. And Jimmy Dore's white, I'm white. We got to handle this with some nuance. I have to emphasize I don't want to talk over black people. I don't want to. Absolutely, this is very important. Absolutely. I get that. I hope I get it. Absolutely. So Jimmy Dore could have been more nuanced. Okay. Anyway, there's a whole ruckus, the Jimmy Dore debate, whole ruckus about this, made a ruckus around independent media and people divided. RBN, Revolutionary Blackout Network, who Jimmy Dore's been on fairly often, he's fairly close to, they were mixed. Sabi Sabs was really angry at Dore, she was livid. Compton Jay, on the other hand, strongly supported Dore. He was pissed off at Cornel West. Nick and CJ and some of the other Rome, I don't know how Rome felt. They were kind of in between, I guess. They were kind of upset, broadly support Cornel. Cornel West is a frequent guest on RBN. He's close to them. I agree. Now, the big thing is the next day, it was announced that Cornel West had picked this guy, Peter Daou, as his campaign manager. And Jimmy Dore said, yeah, and then I said there was an infiltrator. Well, look who it is. Peter Daou is a very controversial figure, and his appointment really wrecked morale in the Cornel West campaign. Peter Daou is a long-term Democratic Party operative. He was close to the Clintons. Some of his history is part Lebanese. He's part Lebanese, part American. His mother was in the New York publishing business. His father's a Lebanese businessman. Interestingly, Peter Daou's mother's sister, is the writer Erica Young, who wrote Fear of Flying, a famous novel in the 60s and 70s. I read it in high school years later. Erica Young, it sort of talks about her sexual fantasies, and nothing wrong with this at all. It talks about her sexual fantasies. I read it years ago. They have fantasy about her Chinese psychiatrist. Goes on and on and on about that. It talks about the zipless fuck. Really having sex without commitment. This was in the 70s, and this whole thing was new, and it made a big groundbreaking in the 70s, I guess. Interestingly, Peter Daou's father is a character in this book. Somewhat fictionalized. Erica Young claims to have had an affair with him. He denies it. Peter Daou's family denies it. And it doesn't matter. I mean, I'm not holding this against Peter Daou. I'm not trying to, sex shame. Nothing wrong with this at all. Just kind of interesting tidbit there. Anyway, Peter Daou's family, a Lebanese family, they moved to France and they moved back to Beirut. This was in the middle of the Lebanese Civil War. His father supposedly started a bookstore chain, which strikes me as kind of odd. He apparently was in the Phalange, right-wing Christian militia, and received training from the IDF. There are different ways of interpreting this. The Phalange, by the way, carried out horrible massacre of Palestinians, Sabra, Shatila refugee camps, horrible massacre that time. Peter Daou says he wasn't there, he wasn't involved in that, he was a high school kid, and his training was mandatory. He was in the communal system in Lebanon. He was a Christian in this communal system. Training was kind of required. I don't know. There are different. Some people suspect Peter Daou may be lying and a lot about what's going on. He even admitted he was in the Phalange or got training by accident. He was basically bragging on Twitter to a right winger. Said, "Yeah, I got military training. Where were you?" But it came out kind of by accident. So there's that debate going on. Then Peter Daou came to he went to American University in Beirut, then went to NYU in New York, very prestigious university, hard to get into. So he's not a working class kid. He became a political operative right out of college, a political consultant, also a blogger. Okay, this is kind of like around 03, 04. Back in the relatively early days of the internet, if you were a halfway decent writer, you had a blog, you could become sort of famous. Now, he was part of this group called Netroots Nation, which was supposedly, he became politicized by the Iraq War, by Bush and the Iraq War. I wouldn't say radicalized, but politicized, interested in politics, and he wrote about it, blogged about it. He got something of a following. And he was part of this group called Netroots Nation. Most of this element gravitated towards Howard Dean, former governor of Vermont. I'm from Vermont. Former governor of Vermont became intensely unpopular in Vermont after he chased cheap insurance carriers out of the state. Then he led a new career, second career with he was chair of the DNC for a while. Their 50-state strategy, as if that was supposed to mean anything. And he was kind of a hack, really, kind of a pseudo-progressive hack. But basically, Peter Daou, though, gravitated toward. It was believed Howard Dean was an anti-war candidate or a progressive candidate. He really wasn't anti-war. But anyway, so Peter Daou instead gravitated towards the Clinton people, Hillary Clinton, like more the mainstream neoliberal faction of the Democratic Party back then. And he had this. He developed this software. Verit, which is a fact-checking software. And this was back before Russiagate and before the rampant social media censorship. The Verit was a fact-checking site to check out, to call out the lies of the Republicans. And the Republicans were lying. Back then, 2004 or so, that era, it was easier to be a leftist. Seriously, it was a lot easier to be. Now it's so... The security state is being sorted by liberal. It's so weird now. But back then, it was easier to be a leftist. So anyway, this Verit would call it the lies of the Republicans, and Hillary Clinton picked it up and liked it. It didn't go anywhere. It basically failed. It didn't get a user base. Maybe it's still around, but not everybody liked. So that failed. He worked for the Clinton campaign, and there were some sleazy tricks. Worked with a guy, I forget his name, but one of the main campaigners who did less sleazy tricks would post like child porn on Bernie Sanders' Facebook groups, so they would be taken down. And Peter Daou, I don't know if he was part of this, but he was certainly aware of it. So there's that. So then apparently Peter Daou supposedly had a change of heart. He radicalized, moved more over the last couple of years, and it might be sincere. I have no idea. However, he failed at everything he did. I mean, he doesn't have a sterling track record. He really slammed Sanders in 2016, really vicious smears, and slammed Sanders. He kind of came to support him in 2020. I supposedly had a change of heart and supported Sanders in 2020. This time, 2023, he actually was a manager for Marianne Williamson, but left it after some big fight. And he moved to the Cornel West campaign. Now, the morale was really low in the West campaign. People really hated this guy's Democratic Party operative. He's not, wouldn't it be someone else? He could have, they could have picked as a campaign manager, some working class activist, somebody. Why did he pick as Peter Daou? I don't know myself. Well, apparently, it was Jill Stein's idea. If this big internal ruckus she had to admit, it was my idea. We need a professional campaign manager. Jill Stein said, I didn't have a campaign manager. I don't know. I worked for her campaign in when it was 2016, was it? I worked for 2015. I worked for her, paid and unpaid. I had fun doing it. I have some criticisms of her, but I like her vice president, Hajou Mubaraka, much better. Apparently, Cornel West, it was Chris Hedges' idea. Yeah, I forgot to mention about Cornel West. Yeah, he started in the People's Party, which has a lot of issues. Nick Branagh's project has a lot of issues. There are abuse allegations against Nick Branagh, and it fizzled out in some ways. It's still around, but they fizzled out. So apparently, Chris Hedges said it was his idea. He mentions to Jill Stein. Hajou Mubaraka suggested that Cornel West move to the Green Party, which has ballot access in most, not all, but most states. So he did, which was a good move. They're claiming, the People's Party claiming they built this populist message for him, which he didn't, which he decided not to take. He's more like the Rad Lib Democracy Now audience confronting Trump's fascism. If you take that, you're not going to go anywhere. You're just an adjunct of the Democrat. You're campaigning for Joe Biden. Jimmy Dore said, he just gave a 45-minute commercial for Biden, which is what it was. Now, I could be wrong. Now, Jim Kavanaugh, and I'll provide a link to his thing. Jim Kavanaugh had the best take on it. He said, mentioned this a little different than the way I would, but he said, the proof of the pudding is whether Cornel West, whether he has a safe state strategy, like David Cobb, Green Party, tried that. Safe state strategy. You're going to campaign in strategy in states where Biden's going to win. States which are at risk, you're not going to. He said, yeah, I understand. You vote for me, but I understand if you really feel you have to defeat Trump. That's going to be a signal he's not a serious campaign. If you're running as a third-party leftist independent, you're going to have to run against the Democratic Party as well as the Republican Party. You're going to have to run the risk of, not just run the risk, but be proud of being a spoiler. Seriously, be proud. And I don't like Trump. Don't think I like Trump, but Trump is a lesser evil by far. He's a lesser evil. I mean, we have a good chance of getting into a direct nuclear confrontation if Biden's reelected. And I don't dig Trump. A lot of things about him are deeply reactionary. But I don't support either candidate. Trump is a lesser evil. I don't support either candidate, independent working class movement. Is Cornel West able to build this? The proof of the pudding, if he does not do the safe state crap, but fully runs against both parties. And also Peter Daou, like Cornel West says he supports Assange, I believe him. Peter Daou needs to say this too. There's some rumors or some, I don't know, allegations that he's an infiltrator, he's a corporate deep state infiltrator, which might be true. I don't know the proof of the pudding whether he uncritically supports Julian Assange. That's the thing. So we'll see how things develop. It's going to be a tumultuous election. We'll see. We'll see how things develop. And there are probably a million other things which I wanted to say, but escaped my mind offhand. But anyway, that's it for now. Have a good day, and thank you. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks.